Welcome to the last lecture for our Civil War Reconstruction unit. This lecture is called The Unfinished Revolution, and I wish I could claim that as something I thought of, but I didn't. I stole that from a distinguished historian, Eric Foner. So we're going to be talking about Reconstruction and what it means, what it did, what it didn't do, with an eye towards African Americans especially. So 4.05 is the target for this lecture. Let's begin. Reconstructing the southern states is really over by 1870-71. States are all back in the Union at that point. But there's lingering expectation that the North will continue to monitor what's going on in the South. There are troops still in the South. But Southerners are increasingly tired of Reconstruction, and Northerners are getting that way too. All of this will come together in the 1876 election. First, we need to understand that many people are just tired of Reconstruction because of the corruption that was going on nationally and locally. More nationally than anything else, President Grant's administration was seen as fostering corruption. And since President Grant was Republican and Republicans were in charge of Reconstruction, then by some kind of weird transitive property, Reconstruction was corrupt too. Therefore, lots of people are painting this image of Reconstruction as bad, corrupt, it's wrong. There's all kinds of dubious and horrible things happening. And there are horrible things happening, but they're all being done by Democrats, not Republicans. For example, the KKK is on the rise. They're using violence against African Americans, murdering them in order to win and control elections. So if you really want to talk about corruption, you really need to look at Southern Democrats at this time. Most people didn't see it that way, though. They just felt like this is a problem the South needs to figure out on its own. Add to that, voters getting tired of Reconstruction policies, they stop electing or supporting people who want to keep punishing the South or want to keep troops in the South. And with the economy crashed at the time, people are just losing the will to keep up Reconstruction. So when the election happens in 1876 to elect a new president, all hell breaks loose. This election saw violence by the KKK against African Americans. There were disputed votes. Some places weren't sure who won the election and where the vote tallies were. There were all kinds of problems with the election. And with it being disputed, it had to be decided what was going to be the result. Was it going to be the Democrat or the Republican? So a commission was created to decide this election, and they awarded it to Rutherford B. Hayes. But in the background, on the side, a little side bargain, Hayes's Republican friends were negotiating with Southern Democrats and saying, well, if Hayes becomes the president, then we will end Reconstruction and we will make sure that Southern Democrats are left to continue doing as they have always done. Sorry, apparently that's harder to say than I thought. So this little backdoor deal made Hayes the president, though he probably shouldn't have been the president, in exchange for backing out of reconstructing the nation. So troops are going to be removed from the South. The president's not going to intervene if African Americans get attacked. Southerners are going to just be allowed to do what they want to do. So all of that effort put into granting African Americans the right to vote, making them equal under the law, giving them citizenship, that effort goes for nothing. With the rise of attacks by the Ku Klux Klan and violence against African Americans, it becomes dangerous to vote. You are taking your life into your hands if you vote. And it doesn't stop there. Any African American who challenges Southern power and Southern whites' determination to rule will probably be attacked and killed. So when we look at Reconstruction and try to evaluate it, we can evaluate it from the perspective of it giving freedom and hope to the people who were once enslaved and opening a door for them that was not open before. You can't downplay the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. But at the same time, you look at those amendments and you have to realize that Reconstruction ultimately didn't protect people to exercise those rights. And what good is it having a right if violent folks threaten you and take it away? What good is it to be able to vote if you don't have the power to actually exercise your right to vote? So the KKK used violence to frighten freed people. Violence was used to intimidate African Americans and keep them down and keep them from challenging any white authority in the South. States gradually took away 14th and 15th Amendment rights. They found legal loopholes to pass laws that we're going to look at later. And these loopholes essentially ended your 14th Amendment and 15th Amendment rights. It deprived you of having the rights. And finally, let's address something that's really important. We've already mentioned that Reconstruction never addressed racism. That wasn't on the discussion table. But it really didn't address economics either. Reconstruction may have set people free, but it never addressed the fact that they had once been enslaved. They were never given payment for the millions and millions of hours that they worked for nothing. They were never given the means to have a better life. They just had to step away from the shackles of slavery and make it the best they could. And I would like to point out, it takes economic power to be able to exercise your rights. If you're starving and in poverty, the last thing you're really thinking about is voting. The way that many Southerners trapped the ex-slaves was through sharecropping. This is a system of giving freed people just enough economic power over their lives to make them think that they're getting somewhere. But in reality, they never get anywhere. And I'll explain how that system works on an upcoming slide. What the system does is essentially trap them in debt. They are not free because they are indebted to the person who owns the land that they're using. So let's take a look at that system now so you can understand how it works. Let's say you're a freed African American. You don't have any property. So you go to Mr. White Man down the road and he says, okay, I will let you work this land. I will sell you some seeds. And at the end of your growing season, I will take half of your crop as payment for working the land. Meanwhile, Mr. African American, who has nothing to start with, has to buy supplies on credit from the landowner since he doesn't have anything to begin with. He's got to start from nothing, literally nothing. So it's not just seeds, but maybe he needs like farming equipment. Maybe he needs to buy food, and he has to buy that on credit, which means it's going to come out of the crop that he grows at the end of the year. So he plants the crop, which in many cases is cotton in the South. He harvests the crop and he gives it to the landowner. The landowner takes it and sells it and keeps half as rent for the land, but then also takes out of it any money that he's owed for stuff that the freed person has bought during the year. Sometimes what the freed person finds is that he owes more than his crop has actually brought at market. And he finds that he will start his next year owing money, and he will have to give even more of his crop the next year. Now imagine if you repeat this after several years, you could run up a big enough bill that you could never leave. And if you never leave, are you really free? Well, you're not a slave legally, but in many ways you are a slave economically. And this system traps many African Americans under the thumb of powerful white folks. So why is Reconstruction an unfinished revolution? For a brief moment, African Americans were set free from slavery, given equality under the law, allowed to vote. They sent people of color to the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives, people like Blanche K. Bruce and Hiram Revels. These are folks who would speak on behalf of African Americans in a legislative hall that had once been only for white men. African Americans got educations, they moved, they searched for missing family. But at the end of all of this, the door closes for them as Southerners decide that they are not going to allow African Americans to exercise their full equal rights. And they create an oppressive society that is determined to make African Americans distinctly a second-class group of people in the South. That system will last from 1877 until 1965. For almost the next 100 years, the promise of Reconstruction will go unfulfilled, even as African Americans are clawing their way towards equality and fighting to recognize their real rights in American society.